Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the 1615 podcast, Evangelism for Today. We have another awesome episode for you all. Today, I have special guest, Dr. Larry Moyer, founder and CEO of EvanTell. Hi, Larry. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good to be with you.
Good. We're glad to have you back. We love having you.
Oh, thank you. I always enjoy being with you.
Awesome. So today, we're actually going to be talking about reaching relatives in evangelism, especially during the holidays. But before we dive into that, if you have not listened to our previous episode, we had an awesome episode with a special guest, Wally Goma. He shared his testimony and a little bit about workplace evangelism. So after this episode, go take a listen. It was awesome. But for today, we're going to be talking about how do you share the gospel with relatives, especially during the holidays. Sometimes, there's a lot of pressure about evangelizing in the holidays and Thanksgiving, Christmas, or you haven't seen relatives in a while, or things are just awkward and difficult, and we're going to be addressing those today. And so, Larry, we just want to start off by asking, why is it difficult to talk to your own family about the gospel?
Well, so many times it's been said the two things families don't talk about are politics and religion because they tend to be divisive. And these are the people you grew up with. They know you well. You don't want to drive a wedge between your relationships. And so therefore, it's a sensitive area, and this makes it more difficult because other things they don't have opinions about. But when it comes to politics and religion, people have opinions. And therefore, it's very difficult sometimes for families to talk about things. I have been with families that they could talk about anything across the table. I had a buddy of mine in seminary that his parents could talk about their sexual relationships across the table, but he was by far the unusual, not the norm, because the norm is they don't talk about those kind of things over the table.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. So what do you do if you have the burden to see the holidays as an opportunity to share the gospel, but you don't because of fear?
Well, one place you start, as I tell people, is on your knees, because you have to ask God, give me the boldness I need. The people in the New Testament that shared Christ did not do it without fear. They did it in spite of fear. But you have to ask God for the boldness that overcomes the fear instead of allowing the fear to overcome the boldness. And I always tell people, in essence, start on your knees. Ask God to give you boldness. Mm-hmm. Now, to encourage the audience, at times when I'm afraid, here I am, someone with the gift of evangelism, but even times when I'm afraid. People with the gift even have times of fear. But I have never once asked God for boldness. I did not receive it, not one time. Sometimes right in the spur of the moment, I say, God, give me boldness. And I felt boldness well up inside of me that I did not have 60 seconds before that.
Wow, that's so true. Asking God for boldness is powerful. It's very powerful.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So what holds people back from talking to families around the holidays? Because it's a little different when you add the holidays mixed into that. Yes.
The holidays are a time of celebration, excitement, everything else. And so therefore, you're intimidated by the fact that if you bring up, quote, religion, end of quote, how is that going to affect the relationship? Is that going to drive the family apart instead of bringing them together? How are people going to respond? And therefore, although in one way, the two times people think most about Christ are Christmas and Easter. In one way, although it's the most receptive time, in the other hand, you're not certain of the outcome and therefore what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so true. That's true.
It's the unknown.
It is the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't let the unknown keep you from sharing.
No, you cannot.
Mm-mm. So what makes the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, what makes that a good opportunity to share the gospel?
It makes it a good opportunity because you're there together. People tend to be more mindful of spiritual things over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. Again, the two times people tend to go to church are Christmas and Easter. And so therefore, that gives it a great opportunity because their minds is a little bit more along the lines of spiritual things. Also, one thing that I don't think is addressed enough so many times, Samantha, is that you come to the end of the year and you start reflecting. You reflect on the past year, you reflect on the next year, and you ask yourself the simple question, do I want next year to be like the past year? Mm-hmm. And although may not say that to you if I'm an unbeliever, At the same time, that's in the back of my mind because you tend to do more reflection at the end of the year. I don't hear people talk about what they're reflecting on in the middle of the summer. They're going on vacation.
That is
but
true.
they're reflecting on more at the end of the year.
That's true. That's true because around Thanksgiving, they're thinking about the things that they're grateful for, all the things that have happened throughout the year that's involving gratitude. And then Christmas and New Year's come and they're reflecting on New Year's resolutions and things like that. And so they're starting to think about how life has gone in the past year. And oftentimes it opens them up to spiritual things.
You're exactly right. I tell people, unbelievers may be unbelievers, but they're not stupid. Mm-hmm. They think the same way you and I do. Thanksgiving. What is Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And it means the same thing to an unbeliever. Now, it means more to a believer, granted. But at the same time, when Thanksgiving comes, you think of Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, it makes an opportunity for the gospel.
Yeah, that's so, so true. So what is one of the biggest mistakes people make around the holidays when it comes to evangelism?
One of the biggest mistakes they make when it comes to evangelism is if you're burdened for family, and you ought to be, because after all, you want those to be part of your family on earth, to be part of your family in heaven. Who does not want those close to them on earth to be close to them in heaven? But at the same time, mistake so many times is made is that I got to use the holidays to evangelize. Well, I'm not discounting that, but you cannot think just of the holidays. You got to think of beyond the holidays. In other words, sometimes the holidays become a time of bridge building to do something that should have been done throughout the year. So therefore, if I'm with you and we don't get to see each other that much, I say, Samantha, we hardly ever meet except at Christmas. We're close enough. We all get together throughout the year and talk every now and then. And so you use it as a time of connecting, not just for the holidays, but for the entire year. And I think the mistake that's made is when you look at the holidays as a stopping point, in many ways, it ought to be the starting point. I'm going to be the most I've ever been in terms of reaching out to my own family this coming year. But to do that, I begin building the bridge this year. And so therefore, the holidays become the beginning. It's not the end, because I look at it as a time to build the bridge for something I can do then and follow up on throughout the year.
That's so true. I like the point that you make. A lot of us think of the holidays as an ending point rather than it should be the starting point.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind as you're evangelizing to your family is like, okay, I'm creating connections. I'm building a bridge. Maybe if they don't convert in this right moment, that's okay, because I'm going to build a connection that'll last longer than that.
I often say to believers, is your witness over when the holidays are over? Is your witness over when the holidays are over? If it is, you're approaching it the wrong way. Because that ought to be, again, the starting point, not a stopping point. Because the reality is, sometimes when you're with relatives and family over the holidays, there's a lot of people there. And so you don't have a chance to talk one-on-one privately the ways you'd like to, because people open up more when you talk with them privately. And so therefore, you cannot look at it as a stopping point, just a starting point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that, Larry. So another question I have for you, is this Christmas a better Christmas than other past Christmases to share the gospel? I know that was a lot, but I'll repeat it. Is this Christmas a better Christmas than other past Christmases?
I've been privileged to be an evangelist for over 50 years, Samantha. I have never seen unbelievers more open and approachable than they are today. Now, when I say that to people say, wow, when I look at the news in Washington, people don't seem that approachable. Washington is not the norm. They're the weirdos. That's not the norm. The normal person does not know if he'll be alive next year because of cancer, doesn't know if he'll have a job next year, and wondering how he's going to keep his family together. When you look at those three things, that makes him very approachable. And so therefore, I would say this is even a better opportunity. I've been, again, in evangelism for over 50 years, and I've never seen people more approachable about spiritual things. In some of our outreaches, we're averaging 54% unbelievers in attendance.
Wow.
Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, unfortunately, believers have lost that burden for the lost. That across the board, the burden in our churches for lost people is not close to where it was in 1973 when I started.
Yeah, that's so true. I think you have a good point as far as the average person is dealing with things and circumstances right now that are hard. Cost of living is up. There's a lot of situations that right now are just challenging, and I think people are naturally a little bit more open to hearing for something greater than themselves at this moment.
Death is no longer taken for granted.
It's not.
It's not taken for granted like it used to be. It used to be taken for granted. It's not anymore. Because you don't know something unusual is going to happen. Explosion is going to take place. Mass murder. You don't know what's going to happen. Cancer is reality. One out of 4 families at least is being hit with it. And therefore is something that is not taken for granted anymore. It's a great opportunity for the gospel.
It is. I agree. That's awesome, Larry. So, is it not true that someone outside the family has a better opportunity to share than someone inside the family? I know sometimes, people are like, well, it's probably better if they hear the gospel from someone else and not me, because we're blood, we're related.
Yes. Sometimes somebody outside the family has an even better opportunity. I sincerely cannot tell you how many people I've been privileged to lead to Christ have said to me, I don't know why I could not listen to my own family. She'd been telling me this for years. And that's a comment I've heard many times from people I've had the privilege of leading to Christ. Because I've even had sometimes the new converts say to me, why did I listen to you and wouldn't listen to my own family? And I looked at them and I smiled. I said, because I'm not related. And they laughed. They said, you're right. And you tend to listen to somebody outside. Now, here's the difficulty. When that becomes an excuse. In other words, that's an explanation. It dare not become an excuse. Because sometimes, I would argue, because you are in the family and they know you, even if they sense you're a little bit hesitant to talk because you're not sure I'm going to respond, they're going to at least respect you for that. And as a family member, you have a chance to say things that, they're going to listen to. So the point I'm making is don't carry that too far, because sometimes somebody outside the family does have a better opportunity. But still, God might want to use you as a person in the family. And people say, well, they know all about the things I've done wrong and all that. Here's what's mind-blowing. Hardly ever do they bring that up. Hardly ever do they bring that up. And if they do, use an opportunity to witness. You say, well, I admit I've really made some mistakes, but one of the things I love about my relationship with Christ, He's forgiven me of all those. And I regret that. I ask for your forgiveness for anything I've done wrong to you. But at the same time, I'm so thankful I've been forgiven. And you don't back away from it just because of that. But the point to encourage the audience is hardly ever do they bring that up. That's something Satan is simply trying to use to intimidate. And Satan's a master of intimidation. There's nobody better at it.
That is so true. It's true, because that's the number one thing he doesn't want you doing. He doesn't want you sharing the gospel. He doesn't want you going out and having other people become believers, because that just glorifies God's kingdom.
Yes.
And so that is the biggest intimidation he can give you is, oh, your sin will get brought up and that's just nasty. Don't mess with that. And that's just not always true.
I've had many times believers have said to me, Samantha, suppose I witness and they bring up this and that, then what do I do? But many times they come back and they say, I'd say to them, how many times do you think, have you heard of somebody bringing that up? The fact is, hardly ever do they. It's just something Satan's trying to use to intimidate us.
Yeah, that's so true. That's another great thing to keep in mind as you are sharing the gospel with family is don't let Satan intimidate you from doing that. And those are really awesome points. So, Larry, there is something, you had a part in having your family come to Christ. And so tell us a little bit, just give us like a Reader's Digest of how that happened.
Well, I'm a lover of the outdoors. I love the outdoors. My favorite sport is hunting. I love the outdoors. And Dad on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania said, if you work hard all year, when November comes, you can have the whole month off to go hunting. So every day after school, every Saturday, I hit the woods. I just love to hunt. We live on wild game. We love the meat. And so I just enjoy the outdoors. I looked at the trees, the squirrels, the deer, etc. I thought there's got to be a God. Nobody would have convinced me there's no God. Nobody. 100 atheists could not convince me there's no God. But how do you know them, find them, etc.? I decided to study the Bible, and I came to Christ from my own Bible study. God took me from the creation, the creator, to Christ. And one night I knelt by my bed as a teenager and said, God, the best I know how, I'm trusting you alone as my only way to heaven. And my life exploded. Well, obviously, I had a burden from my own relatives because I was raised in a church that when it started was conservative. Now it's become a very liberal church. And so therefore, you don't talk about Christ, etc. And so after 27 years of praying, my own mother and dad assured me that their trust was in Christ alone as their only way to heaven. After 27 years of praying.
Wow.
And Dad went to be with the Lord in 1988, Mom in 1996.
Wow.
But after 27 years of praying, they assured me their trust was in Christ alone. But the biggest difficulty I had was, well, you know, we raised a preacher, didn't we? So I felt I became part of the problem because we raised the preacher, didn't we? And I had to convince them that it's by grace. You're saved by grace, not by works. It's nothing you've done. It's a free gift. And so I understand what it's like to be raised in that kind of a family because we did not talk about Christ across the table. One of the things that I remember so vividly when I came to Christ, I was so excited. Now, what meant a lot to me was not what was under the tree. It's the one that made the tree. That's what excited me. And I remember thinking, it's so exciting because I'm related to the one who made that tree. I don't care what's under the tree. What I know is I'm related to the one who made the tree. And I thought, I'm going to ask if the family, when we get together for opening presents, if I can read the Christmas story before we start. And Samantha, I chickened out. I wanted to, but I didn't have the nerve. Yeah. And obviously, as I grew as a believer and developed my gift of evangelism, God increased my boldness. But I didn't have that boldness then. And I remember so vividly, I wanted to do it, but I didn't because I felt we're missing the whole story of Christmas.
That's amazing, Larry.
But God still worked. And so, again, after years of praying, they assured me their trust was in Christ alone as their only way to heaven.
Yeah. I think you can learn a lot from your testimony of sharing the gospel with your family. And one of them being you prayed consistently for 27 years. That is like powerful.
Yes.
Very powerful. And something I would encourage anyone who has family or relatives that doesn't believe in the gospel, just start praying. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Just start praying constantly.
Yes, unfortunately, in my case, it took a tragedy to turn the situation around because my brother, who was 6 years older than I was, died of a massive heart attack at 46 years old. He was extremely overweight, did not watch his diet and health and that kind of thing. And his wife died 5 years before he did of a blood clot.
Oh, no.
So she died, and then 6 years later, he died. And so the three girls who are very close to me and I'm close to them, lost their mother and dad in 5 years. Wow. I mean, how many families do you know that the three girls lost their mother and dad in 5 years? And God really used that to get their attention, though. And that's one of the things that happened. But God brought a lot of good out of it. And because of it, some great things happened. Wow. And family members assured me of their own salvation.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Larry. I know a lot of people will find that very encouraging.
Yes. I tell people, when you come to family, do what you can, then pray to God will send an additional witness. And you know what the first thing is people say to me? But they're not around any unbeliever. They're not around any believers to witness to them. And I say, now, wait a minute, God's still on the throne. He can bring somebody along their path tomorrow they had no idea was going to come across. I could keep the audience here practically all day telling you about people I've been privileged to lead to Christ, that the family members did not know the one they were concerned about was going to sit on a plane aside of me on the way back to Dallas.
Wow.
I'm thinking of one right now that I had the privilege of leading to Christ. Wow. And it was on a flight to Dallas. And he was so open and approachable with spiritual things. And I have in my files one of the most touching letters I ever got from his fiancée. Said, thank you for being used of God to lead my fiancée to Christ.
Wow.
She came to Christ. She said, I came to Christ a few months ago. I was talking to him. Some days he was open, some days he wasn't. but God used you to lead to Christ.
Wow.
And God's still on the throne. He can bring somebody across their path tomorrow. Or I probably should say this afternoon, that you had no idea he was going to bring across their path.
Wow. That's very hopeful. Yes, that's so true. That is very, very true. So switching gears a little bit, Larry, what if your family has told you under no conditions, they just don't want to hear about spiritual things? They have made it very clear, they're very closed off, and they just don't want anything to do with it, and they don't want to hear anything about it.
Honor what they say. In other words, if they say don't talk, then I honor that. But they can keep me from talking to them. They cannot keep me from talking to God. And therefore I say, God, please open the door. And what is so encouraging is if tomorrow they're diagnosed with cancer, if something happens, it can change in one day. And I'm thinking right now, people have said, I told people not to talk to me, but I didn't realize what was going to happen. And I'm interested in talking. Because just because they're closed today does not say they're going to be closed tomorrow. But the point is, they can keep you from talking to them. They cannot keep you from talking to God.
That's so true.
And so when you pray for them, pray that God will not only open the door, but pray God will send an additional witness. Because, for example, if somebody else comes across their path who's a committed believer and talks with them, well, obviously, you did not say that believer, no, don't talk to this person. You did not even know he was going to be there. You follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So therefore, God can really use that. I'm thinking now of a person who said, he met one person after another who talked to him about Christ, and they did not know each other. And he thought to himself, where do you guys come from? Do they pay you to just go ahead of me and talk? He couldn't figure out how he talked to so many people. And that's why I get excited when I think if the Christian community were zealous in their witness for Christ the way they ought to be, statistics say less than 5% of all believers ever lead anyone to Christ. And that's because they're not talking to people. Now, I want to make something clear. I don't say to people, how many of you led to Christ? That's not your job. Your job's contact, his job's conversion. But at the same time, if you cannot talk to people consistently about Christ without sooner or later leading someone to Christ, there's no way. If you consistently talk about Christ, sooner or later you're going to lead someone to Christ. And so the reason some people have never led someone to Christ, they're not talking to anybody.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of like a muscle you have to work out. You have to actively use it, and you have to actively do it to see the results and to see, and even if, like you said, if you don't lead them to Christ, you're planting a seed. You're planting something there that eventually someone else is going to come along and they'll pick it up.
Yes.
So.
Another way of saying what you're getting at is evangelism is a privilege. It's also a skill that needs to be developed.
Agreed.
Because the more you do it, the better you become at it. You learn how to approach people. You learn how to vary your conversation, learn how to come into it differently, come out of it differently. And those who do it well because they do it often. That's
true. That's so true. It is true. The more you do it, the better it, and the easier it is.
Yeah.
The easier it is, the more you'll find confidence in yourself and being able to do it, and God will give you just that natural ability to start sharing.
And one reason it's easier the more you do it is you find out how few people there are that don't want to talk. And so if you meet someone who doesn't want to talk, you think, boy, he's weird. He's not the norm.
Yeah.
And so you just keep trucking and keep talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because you realize he is not the norm. He's the exception. And that's why I always caution people, if you say, I'm going to be more consistent than I've ever been in evangelism, get ready. Because your first person might be something so non-open, so cold, so callous, because Satan's trying to use that to say, good luck. That's what they're all like.
Yeah.
And the fact is, they're not all like that.
That is true. And it's an intimidation method that he's trying to use to keep you from sharing. But the reality is, like you said, they're not all like that. There are plenty of people out there that want to hear. They're just waiting around for someone to ask them.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, Larry. Thank you. So if there is one thing you could tell us in sharing the gospel, what would it be?
The one thing I keep saying is be clear, be clear, be clear. Because so many people, the gospel was not made clear. We come to Christ, we come to God as sinners, recognize Christ died in our place. He did not die to show us how to die. He died as our substitute. Had he not died, we would have, and he rose again. After we put our trust in him alone. Believe means to trust in him alone as our only way to heaven. Not your good works, not your baptism, not Christ and your baptism, but Christ alone. And the thing I emphasize the most is be clear, because so many times people don't make it clear. Come to Christ. What's that mean? Start going to church? Start cleaning up my behavior? What do you mean come to Christ? Well, you have to explain it clearly, because people don't understand it's a free gift. Whenever I say that, I think of a person I talked to in Russia. After 2 hours of trying to explain to her, 2 hours, she threw her hands up in the air. She said, I get it. I get it. I get it. You're saying it's free. I said, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's free. She said, that's what I've never understood. And people need to hear the gospel, but need to hear it clearly. I tell people the only pressure I'll accept in evangelism is a pressure to make it clear. I won't accept any pressure. How many have you led to Christ? Because that's God's job, not mine. I bring Christ to them. God brings them to Christ. But the only pressure I accept is I got to make the gospel clear. So when they leave my presence, they know beyond any shadow of any doubt what to do to get to heaven. And that's one way I'd encourage those listening today. And that's why you look beyond December. Christmas is a starting point, not the stopping point, because you look beyond it and you maintain your contact. You have other conversations, and who knows, something may happen down the way that all of a sudden, forbid the thought, but they're in a car accident, have a few minutes to live. And right there, they trust Christ because of what you told them how to come to Christ. I think there are people you're going to be surprised to see in heaven, because what you did not know is a slipped into eternity, like the thief on the cross. They said, Jesus saved me. Now, same time, I think there are people who are going to be surprised not to see in heaven, because they were not trusting Christ. They were trusting their good works, their church attendance, etc. And even I would say to those listening to us today that if you're unsure of your salvation, just tell God in your heart right now, I'm a sinner. Christ died for me and arose. I'm trusting him alone to get me to heaven. And the moment you place your trust in Christ alone, you're forever his. It's not saying a prayer. Prayers are now you tell God what you've done. It's a mess in your own mind what you've done. But you're saved the moment you trust in him alone as your only way to heaven. If he can't take me to heaven, I'm going to hell. He's my only way there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Larry. That was just very encouraging. We're going to switch gears just a little bit, and I'm going to ask you a question, because I'm sure a lot of people are kind of wondering this, especially when they're like, oh, my family's crazy, or oh, my family, it's always a party when I go to Christmas or Thanksgiving. And so what do you do when you get together for the holidays and it's just, there's just nothing but a party atmosphere, and you don't have the opportunity to take that person aside, and share the gospel with them, or just have a meaningful conversation or a meaningful connection with them? What do you do?
Look at it as a connecting point, not a conversation point. In other words, you said it so well, you may not have a chance to talk about Christ because there's a lot of things happening, a lot of noise, etc., a lot of people around. It can be a connecting point. You say, you look at them, you say, it's a sad thing we don't see each other more, because I really appreciate you. People want to be appreciated. We ought to get together after the holidays when you have more time. Let me treat you to breakfast, lunch, whatever, and use it as a connecting point. Where people make mistake is they look at that as a chance to connect and then disconnect. You don't connect and disconnect. You connect and connect further, and connect further, connect further. And therefore, that's why, again, as we keep saying, it's your starting point, not your stopping point.
Great point. Great point. So what are 2 things you want people to take away from this today?
If there are 2 things I would say is recognize the clarity of the gospel. You got to make it clear. Be clear, be clear, be clear. Because so many people don't understand it is a free gift. You can't purchase your way to heaven. You cannot work your way to heaven. You cannot to simply trust Christ. Be clear. And then secondly, ask God for boldness. God's got an abundant supply of many things, but he also has abundant supply of boldness. And so right there in the quietness of your heart, you say, God, give me boldness. And if there's two things I would suggest people leave this broadcast with, it's the need to make it clear and the need to always ask God for boldness. And the exciting thing is, I tell people, what's exciting about evangelism, I can be talking to two people at the same time. I can talk to you about your need for Christ, but I can also talk to God about my need for boldness. Because God hears the whispers of the heart.
That's true. And it's so quick and silent too. If you're in mid-conversation, you can always just stop right there, just take a second and be like, God, give me boldness so I can just get this out really quick and share what is on my heart to share.
Yes.
So it's that easy. It's that easy.
It's that easy. And right there, God, I've had boldness brought up in front of me. Nobody likes me to fool out of. At the same time, there's been times I thought, I think he's going to try and make a fool out of me. But right there, I said, God, give me boldness. And right there, God gave me boldness.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are really good key points, just boldness and the clarity of the gospel. And one thing I'm taking away is not to allow the enemy to intimidate you when you're sharing with your family, because that's really big.
Yes, Satan is a master of intimidation. It's not going to work and all. And you don't know what's happening in their lives. They may be more open than they've ever been before. Yeah. And furthermore, even if God doesn't use you, he may use to bring them to Christ. He might use you to cause them to start thinking. And then somebody else comes along. And it's a known fact that sometimes somebody takes somebody outside the family. Yeah. But at the same time, that cannot become an excuse for not sharing Christ.
Yeah. So, Larry, do you have any resources that people can use to share the gospel?
Well, one resource I would share, we have this book called How to Share the Gospel. And when they open it up and go to the table of contents, find chapter 4 is How to Reach Your Relatives. And so this book would be a big help to people. And chapter 4 is a chapter just on reaching relatives. And I would encourage people to call our office and order a copy of that because it's been used to help people a lot in their witness.
Yes, awesome. Well, I will have this book, How to Share the Gospel, or Show Me How to Share the Gospel, linked in our show notes. And if you use the code PODCAST on our store, that's PODCAST, all caps, you can receive free shipping and a signed copy from Larry. I know you were very excited to offer signed copies.
I'll be happy to.
Awesome. But I think it'll be a great resource, especially if you're trying to share. You have a few people in mind that you're going to be seeing over the next couple holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, that you can just read over and prepare yourself so that way you can go in there with the confidence and the boldness that you need. So do you have anything else, Larry?
Well, I think, whenever I have an opportunity like this to talk, and, I cannot encourage the audience enough. In our day, in this year, people are approachable with the gospel. And it's because some of the crazy things that are happening today, people want to know, where am I going when I die? Even if they don't say it, even if they don't always talk about it, people are wondering what's going to happen when I die. And therefore, they don't take that for granted. This is a prime day for evangelism. And there's a saying I often repeat because I love it. It says, when I stand in the heavenly city and saints around me appear, I hope somebody comes up and says, you're the one that invited me here. And I say, people, can you think of anything more exciting than when you stand in the heavenly city and saints around you appear, someone comes up and says, you're the one that invited me here. And the only thing you can take with you to heaven is a friend. All saved people get to heaven. All saved people are not equally rewarded. God rewards those who live for him. You don't get to heaven because of anything you've done, but God rewards those who, having come to Christ, then live for him. But at the same time, reward is something we receive when you get there. The only thing you can take with you from here to there is a friend.
That's true.
And for that reason, what impact that ought to have upon our lives.
Mm-hmm. It should be an honor.
Yes.
To be able to bring friends with us.
Yes.
It's an honor. So, well, we appreciate you for joining us for another episode, Larry.
Oh, thank
it's always
you.
a special treat when you have lots to say and are passionate about. I know you're very passionate about this topic specifically, so it's a treat and it's an honor to have you here, and I know others will find it very encouraging.
Great. We're here to help, and anything we can do to assist in a person's witness, why they have their address and everything for EvanTell, and everything we do is evangelizing and training others. Mm-hmm. So let us know how we can help.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, that is today's episode, and we will see y'all in the next one.